The goal coming into the season is to walk away with the franchise quarterback. And the people in that building, the people in that locker room really believe in Bo Nix. Not because they're told to, not because they say it and roll their eyes, because of his leadership on and off the field and the way he's played, frankly, since week 5. It's just like, man, we feel like we got a guy. I wrote that in my post column today, that he went from being the starting quarterback on October 6th, the moment he yelled at Sean Payton and kind of stood his ground, to now he's their franchise quarterback. And that's a big deal for this team. And it's 14 starters since Peyton Manning. And to me, they finally have their guy.
Hello, and thank you for joining us here on Broncos and Bourbon. I am your host, Phil Milani. Very excited about today's conversation as Denver Post sports columnist Troy Renck joins me. We get into all sorts of different things here. He wrote a column this week talking about how Bo Nix is now the Broncos franchise quarterback. He sort of labeled him that this week after his performance against the Kansas City Chiefs. So we'll get into a lot of Bo Nix talk. I asked him if there's a player in the NFL that reminds him of Bo Nix, and I think you're going to be interested by Troy's comp here. Not the player who I was originally thinking of. So stick around for that. And then also, so much of this season for the Broncos has been about developing Bo Nix. But I asked Troy, and I want to know, how important is it for this team to finish with a winning record and to get into the playoffs? You know, the path is certainly there for the Broncos with how the rest of the AFC has been playing so far through 10 weeks of the season. So I asked Troy about that, and I think that we had some really good conversation. Today's nightcap in our review is going to be a Buffalo Trace, which has been growing in popularity here for people who are either getting into bourbon, who already enjoy bourbon but don't want to spend a ton of money. Buffalo Trace has become a go-to, and so we'll do an official review here later on in the show. But for now, let's get to my conversation with my dear friend, Troy Renck. Troy, thank you so much for taking some time to hop on the show here. How you been?
Doing fantastic, Phil. Good to see you, my friend.
How's life over at the Denver Post these days?
Yeah, listen, I was trained to be a writer in college, even though I did a lot of radio. And as much as I enjoyed doing TV, I didn't realize how much I missed writing. And being a columnist is the last thing I had never done. It's the reason I left the Post 7 years ago, because I didn't get the columnist job. And it's the reason I went back. So it's been a joy. I really love the process of sitting down and writing 2 to 3 hours on one topic. And so it's been great. And to cover other sports, while my primary focus is Broncos, to cover other sports has been good for my mental health as well.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, we've enjoyed reading all of your columns this year. What's the vibe like around the Broncos these days? After jumping out to I think they won 5 out of 6 there, but now they've lost the last 2. What's the vibe like around the team these days?
Well, you know as well as anyone, Phil, these last 8 years have been difficult. No playoff berths, 7 straight losing seasons. The difference with this team this year is that the culture that Sean Payton created a year ago has kind of taken root. He's got more of his players in. You see an investment that when they lose these tough games, I don't see guys pointing fingers. I see them pointing inward. They feel like they're better than what they've shown these last couple of games. They feel like they're a playoff team. They understand, Phil, that the schedule's in front of them to be a playoff team, frankly, because the AFC's down this year. And honestly, the goal coming into the season is to walk away with the franchise quarterback. And the people in that building, the people in that locker room really believe in Bo Nix. Not because they're told to, not because they say it and roll their eyes, because of his leadership on and off the field and the way he's played, frankly, since week 5. It's just like, man, we feel like we got a guy. I wrote that in my post column today, that he went from being the starting quarterback on October 6th, the moment he yelled at Sean Payton and kind of stood his ground, to now he's their franchise quarterback. And that's a big deal for this team. And it's 14 starters since Peyton Manning. And to me, they finally have their guy. So no matter how this season ends, to walk away from it and know that you've got a quarterback, that's a huge step in the right direction for a franchise that's been floundering at that position.
What do you think it is about Bo? Because I saw your column, Troy. What do you think it is about Bo that everybody's taken to him so quickly? I mean, it really seems like the media enjoys him. It seems like his teammates, they voted him a captain. What do you think it is about his personality that everybody's really taken to him so quickly?
Well, one of the things, like, we had fun with the Ferris Bueller stuff. He's really not Ferris Bueller. That's Sean Payton. He's closer to Iceman, which was his Halloween costume. He has said that if he weren't a football player, he'd be an FBI agent. And he grew up in a football household where his dad was his coach his entire life. His dad was a bit of a disciplinarian, Patrick Nix. So this is a guy who likes detail. He likes regimen. He likes structure, routine. And he's the kind of guy that, embraces the process, if you will. And, like, I love Drew Lock, and I thought at times he could be the guy. That was the harder part for Drew. He loved Sunday, but the other parts were harder for him early in his career. It didn't help they changed offensive coordinators after his rookie season. But in Bo's case, what is it they like about him? It's everything they see both on and off the field. His work ethic in the weight room, his ability in the film room, his ability to be coached and not make the same mistake twice. He's confident, but he has humility. He understands he's a rookie, but he also knows he's a captain. Like, you saw how he defended Alex Forsythe yesterday. That's what a captain does, and doesn't do it because someone told him in the PR, pulled him aside and said, hey, you need to defend him. It's because of who he is. So those are the little things. The bigger part is, and you know this, is he's playing better. The first month was rocky, and I blame a lot of that on Sean Payton for trying to ask him to be Drew Brees. He was coaching the quarterback he wanted, not the one he had. And he realized kind of after the Jets game and moving into that Tampa game, it was more the Tampa game, but the Jets game, he kind of realized, like, this kid's got dynamic athleticism. He runs better than they think. We've got to continue to gear it around that. So why is it the players are responding to him? He's got 35 plays of, more than 20 yards. Like, he's an explosive player. And in the huddle, he's calmer than a lagoon. And the reason he's calm is because he knows his stuff. He's not panicky, And again, the people that don't like Bo, I understand it. And their main complaint is they just think the ceiling's too low. They're like, this is as good as it's going to get. I disagree with that. I think he can be a top 12 quarterback in this league. I'm not saying he's going to be a top 5. He's played like a top 12 quarterback, Phil, since week 5. 9 touchdowns, 2 picks. He doesn't make the same mistake twice. He was their best player, the Broncos' best player at Baltimore. And he outplayed Mahomes in Arrowhead in his first game there. And he put him in position to win that game. So those are the things the players see. They see that. All the other stuff off the field does matter. I'm never going to diminish that as how he embraces the process. But the bigger thing is he's showing it through performance. And at the NFL, guys don't care where you're drafted. They don't care. If you can win them games, they are going to align with you. And they look at Bo as a guy who can win games for him.
Yeah, it feels like that team has a lot of confidence, and I think a lot of that stems from, what Bo Nix has been able to do out there. And I like what you said there, like, he's got a good balance, huh, Troy, about, like, he's got enough confidence, but he's also humble enough to know that he's a rookie. I think that really stands out, too. It feels like he just was born with some natural leadership ability, too. Would you say, Troy?
Yeah, I mean, his dad was the quarterback at Auburn. Patrick, he's my age. I watched his dad play in college, and he grew up in that environment. And it is part of the remarkable story of Nix and why they liked him so much coming out of the draft, beyond the accuracy and his kind of simplification of life of, he's married, he's older, he's mature, he's family, football, it's probably faith, family, football. That's pretty much it. Not a lot of distractions. But when you look at this, Phil, his dream since he was a little kid was to be the quarterback at Auburn. And he was their top recruit. I remember watching his first game, and he threw a touchdown. What's that guy's name? Seth, the former receiver. It was Seth Williams?
Williams. Yeah.
Yeah, he threw a touchdown to him to beat Oregon in his first game. I watched that game. It was at Dallas, the Cowboys Stadium, and he didn't play particularly well, but he comes up with this huge play at the end of the game to win it. And that was his dream. He was their Tim Tebow, like a better throwing version of Tim Tebow. And then by year 3, he's on his 3rd offensive coordinator. He's hurt. He's getting booed. And he has to transfer from Auburn, where he's met his future wife, where his family has invested their whole life cheering for. And all he does is go to Oregon and reinvent himself. And I think going to the Northwest, kind of as far away from Alabama, both culturally, socially, everything was just a good reset for him to kind of reinvent himself. And he goes with Kenny Dillingham, who's now the head coach at ASU. And Kenny did something remarkable for him. Rather than, because Kenny was his coach the 1 year, his freshman year at Auburn when he was his best there. When he gets back to Oregon with Kenny, rather than Kenny saying, you know what, I got to get my hands on this guy, I'm going to fix him, I'm going to do all, he went to Bo and said, you know, we got to clean up some footwork stuff, but this is your offense. Take it over. And by giving him ownership, it just, the light bulb went back on. It was part of the trust issue of, hey, you're my guy. But he went to him, and instead of overcoaching him, he was like, I know what you can do. Here's the offense. Teach these guys. And he beat out another 5-star. He becomes the starter and completes 75% of his passes over 2 years and nearly wins the Heisman Trophy. So him learning to deal with that adversity, I think was a good thing for him going into the NFL. Because you watch with Caleb Williams, some of these quarterbacks who've never dealt with adversity, it is rough sled. It is tough sledding. They're not used to it. And again, you're in a locker room with grown-ups. This is their livelihood. They don't have a lot of patience for it, you know. And Bo, having been through what he went through in college, and he's older, he's more mature, it's all working. But it's only working, Phil, because Sean Payton is bending to his strengths, where I didn't think he did the first month. Now it's more RPO, one-side reads. Let's use his athleticism. And I'm telling you, as Audric Estime continues to get the carries, the play action's going to open. I think this offense is about ready to turn the corner. They lack weapons. They got to get weapons in the offseason. They need another receiver. They absolutely have to get a pass-catching tight end. But going forward this year, if Estime's the guy I think he is, their offense is going to get more explosive quickly because of play action.
Yeah, Estime was a breath of fresh air for sure in that running game against the Chiefs. Troy, even after that Chiefs game, you saw Patrick Mahomes talking to Sean Payton about Bo Nix. Travis Kelce on his podcast this week talking about Bo Nix. It seems like so much positivity around him, which is exciting for sure for Broncos fans. But there is room to grow there, right? Because like as great as that first half was against Kansas City, in the second half, the Broncos were shut out. It certainly felt like the defense gave the team a chance to beat Patrick Mahomes again. But it feels like there's some stretches here for that offense where they go silent.
100%. And I'm not saying he's a finished product, and this is not a finished project. You know, that game against the Chiefs showed they still have ground to cover. They're not there yet. Like, when you're going to beat the champ, you got to knock them out. I joked in my column on Monday that, you know, if there was a plutonium spill in Kansas City or in that area, that the only things that would survive would be a cockroach, Chuck Norris, and the Chiefs. Like, that's who they are. Like, you've got to put them away. Like, and they didn't. And the kick is a kick you make probably 95 to 99% of the time. You didn't. And you left yourself vulnerable because your offensive production in the second half was essentially 53 yards. That's not going to win a lot of games on the road. But can they get better offensively? Yes. They've got to execute better in the run game to open up the pass game. They've got to continue to use Bo Nix's legs. Where Bo's made the biggest improvement, and Nick Kosmider has a great piece in The Athletic about that, it's the intermediate throw, the 5 to 15-yarder. The first month of the season, he was completing like 37% of those. Now he's up to like 67, 70%. The next phase of this is the long ball. And we saw it to Cortland Sutton. And again, that's the reason when people are like, why do you like Bo Nix? Did you see how he missed the bomb to Troy Franklin against the Ravens? And the next week, almost the exact same play to Sutton. It's a dime. That's where you see a player who gets it. He doesn't make the same mistakes twice. And you know, Phil, in the NFL, you only get a couple of deep strikes a game. It's not college where, we're going to get it every series. You're going to get it a couple of times, and you miss one. That can be the difference in the game. And so the offense has to improve. Part of it is they lack weapons. And so Sean Payton, it's on him to continue to scheme it up and get your best, most talented players the most touches. And they're doing that with Bo, both in the pass and run game. You can't forget about him as a runner in some of these games. Estime's going to continue to get more carries. And you're seeing Troy Franklin. You're seeing Devon Vele. You're seeing Mims got some touches. That's the key. You're past the midway point. Payton has said these guys are not rookies anymore. So you got to get your best athletes the most touches and see what it looks like. And that's the key for me is offensively being a little more productive because the defense, you cannot ask the defense to every week hold teams to like 17 points in the NFL. It's not fair, and it's not going to be fair at Cincinnati, which could be a play-in game. You've got to be able to control the game offensively at times, and this is a tipping point game, Phil. This Atlanta game against a good team, not a very good defense, but this is the kind of game, if you're a playoff team, you have to win at home.
Yeah, it all sort of setting up for this run here, starting with Atlanta this week. But it does seem like there's a path here for the Broncos to get into the playoffs. I want to ask you more about that in just a second. But one last one here on Bo. Do you have like a good comp? Who's somebody he reminds you of who's played in this league before?
Yeah, it's interesting because everyone wanted to comp him to like Drew Brees light or maybe a Rich Gannon in the pre-draft process. It's not fair. I hate mentioning anyone's name in connection to a Hall of Famer. Drew Brees was the most accurate passer in the history of the NFL. So, like, that's not fair to him. And frankly, they have a different skill set. The first time I saw Bo in person, I was surprised how big he was, how physical he was, and then I was surprised how fast he was. So my comp for him right now, and I leave it subject to change, but Phil, tell me he can't be Jalen Hurts. Why can't he be Jalen Hurts?
I see
I
that.
mean, he doesn't have the physical, the lower half, but you're telling me he can't pass as well as Jalen Hurts? You're telling me he's not close athletically to Jalen Hurts? And what's the difference? Well, Jalen Hurts has A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and Saquon Barkley. So you give Bo a couple more weapons? You wouldn't take that if you're Broncos country?
Oh, I think you'd take it. Yeah, for sure.
I'm not. Yeah, people. Lamar Jackson. No. I'm not saying he's Josh Allen. I'm not saying he's Lamar Jackson. That's not fair to him. And he's not that athlete. But I think he can be Jalen Hurts, and you can win with Jalen Hurts in this league.
Yeah, most definitely. I was going to say like a Baker Mayfield, but maybe he's a little more athletic than Baker.
He's definitely faster than Baker.
Yeah.
Baker has a little better arm than him. Seeing them both live. Baker's tiny by NFL standards, where, he's probably 5'11", 6 foot. He plays with incredible confidence, moxie, poison, but he's not a guy that can get around a corner. Bo can. Now, Baker can throw a deep ball way better than Bo can. But even Baker, this version of Baker, wouldn't you take? Now, again, I see from a comp standpoint, I see more of Hurts because Hurts can beat you with his legs. He gets an insane amount of touchdowns because of the tush-push. But just in general, I think he's got like 380 rushing. Bo's right around 300. Bo's on pace for 500 yards rushing as a quarterback. Like, that kind of athleticism is unique. And that's where I see if, man, you give him a couple more weapons, holy, that you're talking about something now.
Yeah. I was talking to Jake Plummer earlier this year. He said one of the things he likes about Bo is his like twitch. And that he's able to just sort of move slightly so that defenders don't get a clean hit on him, and that is what he really thought that stood out to him. So the athleticism definitely there for Bo Nix, which is exciting. The playoffs here, Troy, you talk about the goal for this Broncos team was to find their franchise guy. Are the playoffs necessary for this team in order to look back and say, hey, we had a successful season?
Well, for me, it would not be because I had them winning 6 games in a rebuilding year.
Same.
And some of it is they're better than I expected, and some of it is the AFC stinks. And they've just absolutely devoured the NFC South. But that's their schedule. Hey, you get an easy schedule because you've been a bad team. You don't apologize for it. You take advantage of it. But they can still have a successful season missing the playoffs because Bo Nix is going to walk away as your franchise quarterback. But it would be devastating given where they are. If you're 5-3 and miss the playoffs, like, it's not a shock they're 5-5. If they were almost a 10.5 point underdog at Baltimore and an 8-point dog at KC. So you can't say it's just the way they lost, the nature of how they lost to KC that hurts so badly. But here's what I've told people, and you've lived it. When you're trying to change a culture, there's certain mile markers on this journey, and one of them is a winning season. And that's why it was so important to Peyton last year. The second one is playoffs, because Phil, if you walk into next season, can you imagine the optimism of 2025? No matter, say you go to Buffalo and you lose 35-3. Who cares? Nobody thought you were going to win anyway. Nobody thought you were going to be there. You go into 2025, you nail free agency, you get a tight end in the draft. Now you're no longer talking about the 8-year playoff drought, the second longest to the Jets, and you never want to be in a sentence with the Jets in the NFL. You never want your franchise to be mentioned in the same sentence as the Jets, with Aaron Rodgers or not, ever. And the second thing is to end the streak of losing seasons. I grew up here. The Broncos, for the better part of 35 years, every year you felt like they're going to make a deep run, whether it was to win a Super Bowl, go to a Super Bowl. So these last 8 years, it's the worst it's been since 63 to 72. So hell yeah, it matters. Get a winning season. That takes that conversation away. And get to the playoffs. Nobody's going to remember in 3-4 years that the AFC stunk, that's how you got to the playoffs. Nobody ever remembers. You think they remember in Seattle with the Beastquake run that team had an under 500 record when they beat the Saints? Once you get in, you get under the velvet rope. Who cares? And it just changes the narrative going into next season. It changes the messaging. We don't have to talk about winning season playoffs anymore. So I think it's incredibly important. It would be disappointing, but I would stop short to saying the season wouldn't be a success, because for me, if you walk away, as they will, with Bo Nix as your franchise quarterback, that was the goal of the season for me coming in.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's even like last week was a good example, like how the year before they beat the Chiefs, that conversation went away about the losing streak last week leading into it. So you head into that game with a different mindset. Same thing for the season. You get into the playoffs or you have a winning season, then heading into next year, you don't have to talk about it. I do think that it's a big deal. And the path is sort of laid out for them, right, Troy? You talked about that Bengals game. Seems like the Colts and the Bengals, those are the two teams, if you're a Broncos fan, you got to worry about right now.
Yeah, the Colts, but going back to Anthony Richardson, with all due respect, I think they're done. I mean, he's just not ready. And so I think I think, Phil, I don't know how you feel about it, but for me, that Bengals game could be a play-in game.
Totally.
I mean, you've got to win 3 of their 4 home games. So you've got to beat the Falcons, Colts, Browns. And if Kansas City's resting its players, even if they're not, maybe you beat them the last game of the season. But you got to think in terms of 3 or 4. Then you have to beat Vegas on the road. They've never won in Las Vegas. And then it could come down to, again, that who wins that Bengals game. That literally could determine the playoff berth. And the Bengals offense is absolutely nasty. They get after it. That's not a great matchup for the Broncos, because I'm not saying it's the Ravens, but you have to be thinking in terms of 27, 30 points. That's why the Ravens were such a bad matchup for the Broncos. You can win a rock fight with the Chiefs right now. The way they're playing, they'll slow the game down. They don't care if they beat you by 3 points. The Bengals and Ravens, you just have to be careful, because they can run away and hide. And the Broncos are not equipped to come back 17-3 on the road. They're not that team yet. But it very well could come down to that Cincinnati game, which we think is going to be on a Saturday in late December, Saturday or Sunday. But that could be their play-in game, because you just look at the rest of the AFC. The Colts are terrible. With all due respect to the Dolphins, too much work. And then the Jets are done. And the one advantage, and this, I'll throw it out there because I'm going to write about it at some point. We know Sean Payton did not like Russell Wilson, both professionally and personally. It's soured. Russell Wilson could get the Broncos into the playoffs, because the Bengals, I think, play the Steelers twice down the stretch. Wouldn't it be something if the Bengals get swept by the Steelers and that's how the Broncos get in?
It has been crazy seeing Russell Wilson dancing out there on the field, throwing those moon balls again. That's just something to pay attention to for Broncos fans, seeing all the success there in Pittsburgh for sure. Speaking of former Broncos players, how are you feeling about Justin Simmons coming back this week?
Yeah, listen, there's very few athletes I've covered in 35 years doing this that I have more respect for, not as a player, which I do, but as a person. I saw him do more good things in a community, in the way he impacted people's lives, the way he impacted his teammates' lives. He's a man of faith. He's a man of family. He's a man of principle. He's just someone that, I'm grateful that our lives intersected. I learned from watching how he acted around other people, even though I'm his 30 years older than Justin or whatever. And I just have a lot of respect for how he goes about his life, because there are times when guys get into professional sports and they put their names on things and it's really about PR. Are they really committed to it? And I never pass judgment on that, because it's still money that's helping someone. Justin is hands-on in everything he does. And my quick story on that, the march he helped create at the Boys and Girls Club.
Yep.
The two girls there that were behind it, but Justin was certainly part of that after all the stuff that with the Black Lives Matter and COVID and everything that went down. But people, they identify that. But what I will say is I've been to that Boys and Girls Club where Justin Simmons shows up. And he shows up, and it's like if they're playing basketball, it's like, hey, Justin's here. We got 5 now. Let's play.
Yeah.
It tells you how often he's there that they see him as one of them. It's just another guy walking through the door. Nobody sees him as a Bronco. No one sees him as someone famous. He's just, hey, put my sweatshirt down. Let's go hoop up. And that's what I mean about Justin Simmons when you talk about authenticity. And then when he left the Broncos and got cut, he thanked every employee that was there. He asked to come back to the facility to thank everyone. He did not do that for PR. I found out later it happened and wrote about it, kind of against his wishes, but just to demonstrate the type of person he is. And I'll never forget that part of him. I was hopeful he'd have a chance at Ring of Fame. It's going to be tough because of the fact he never went to the playoffs to no fault of his own. But he will be a Bronco for life. He said that in his presser yesterday, and it's true. He still lives here. They maintain their residence here. I can see him working in the media here after he retires. Justin will be forever beloved by Broncos country.
Most definitely. Well said there, Troy. You summed it up really well. Really enjoyed getting to know Justin during his time here for sure. Okay, 2 more for you on the Broncos here. Do you have a little past the midway point of the season, but at this point in the year, who's the team's MVP, would you say?
I mean, I'd say Pat Surtain, and a close second is Zach Allen.
Yeah.
And then after that, I would say Bo Nix as number 3. Surtain is he's playing at all-pro level, a defensive player of the year level. It's going to be hard for him to get it without getting some more picks. Zach Allen has just been like J.J. Watt light, just an absolute writing a diary of havoc every game. And then Bo has delivered for an offense that is challenged. Now, Cortland Sutton would be that argument. For me, though, it's Bo Nix. But their best player for me is Pat Surtain.
Yeah, for sure. He's been making those big game-changing plays that haven't seen in the past. So he's added that into his game here. Okay, and then the last one, how do you see this thing playing out? Troy, you said that it's sort of like a must-win game for the Broncos. How do you think that they get it done?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had more confidence because, the Falcons are a tough match because of their offense. They're explosive. They're dynamic all over the field. And again, the Broncos can't chase in a game like this. But if a team is good, when they come off a loss like this, typically they respond in a manner that suggests they're a playoff team. So if they come out and lose this game 24-13, then we probably say, you know what? They're probably a 7-8 win team. This is a tipping point, turning point, defining point for them. At home against the team that just lost to the Saints, a team you're favored against. These are the games you have to win if you're a playoff team. And being in that locker room after they lost to Kansas City, seeing the investment and how pissed off guys were, how much it mattered to them as players. And any team I've ever covered where you care about the guy next to you more than yourself, typically good things happen. I certainly see that dynamic with this team. They lack some talent, but I see that dynamic. So I believe they're going to win a close game. It's going to be greasy. It's going to be uncomfortable, but I believe they find a way, maybe in the same way they lost this past week, they win a game late with a field goal against Atlanta.
Oh, that would be a good story. Yeah, redemption there for the field goal unit. Okay, I like it. Troy, okay, this next segment, we call it Phil's Five. 5 questions about you here. I know you grew up in Colorado. Who is your favorite player growing up?
That would be Roger Staubach of the Dallas Cowboys. I was a Cowboys fan growing up because of Roger Staubach. One of the highlights of my career was meeting him at Super Bowl 30 when I was covering that. And he was every bit the person I'd hoped. They say don't meet your heroes. But I was not disappointed in meeting Roger Staubach. But I just loved the way he played the game. So it was Roger Staubach, and in baseball it was Rickey Henderson.
Rickey Henderson. Okay, yeah. 2 good ones there. Okay. Who is your favorite journalist growing up?
I grew up reading Sports Illustrated, and Doug Looney, who ended up my professor at CU, was one of them. I would say initially it was local, and so that would be Woody Page and Dick Connor and Rick Riley. Those would be ones that I read frequently. Certainly the way Rick Riley and Woody wrote with a sense of humor it helped inspire me in the way I write in that way. But I mean, and Jim Murray of the LA Times is someone I read a lot as I got older and I had access to the LA Times. But those are some of the ones that I read most frequently is columnists and magazine writers. I'd wanted growing up to write for Sports Illustrated, and then the dream kind of changed as the magazine changed, and it didn't really appeal to me to leave. I was a beat writer, and I really kind of found my way that way. But I would say that list of Rick Riley, Woody Page, Dick Connor, Jim Murray, that group of writers.
You could definitely see that in your writing, Troy. I mean, with your sense of humor, that's what people love about you. So it's awesome to see that. Who's been your favorite player to cover?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think if there's like a top five, I'm sure I'm going to leave one or two out. But early in my career, in terms of covering an athlete, it was Dante Bichette. He was great to me. And when I was on the Rockies beat for the Times Call, I could call him on the hotel when they were on the road. I covered all home games and some spring training, but I didn't go on the road. I broke some stories about the Rockies when I was a young journalist because of Dante Bichette. So he would be on that short list of guys and he helped my career, frankly, because he took me so seriously that it allowed people, I think, even when you saw my clips, to see me in a different light as a young journalist. So I'll always be indebted to Dante for that. And some of these are more baseball, but Troy Tulowitzki and I really connected. We're still, and we became even closer friends after he left the Rockies. But Troy Tulowitzki and Matt Holliday, Ryan Spielborgs were all in that group of guys that I became friends with after they left the team because of relationships we established. In terms of Broncos, there was some way back in the 90s, Howard Griffith, the fullback who I still talk with here and there as someone that was just such a joy to be around. Mark Schlereth, covering him when he was on the Broncos. We're friends to this day. And then that no-fly zone group of, Chris Harris, TJ Ward. And I would be remiss without that. And I just talked to him this past week. One of the players I respect most, and Justin Simmons is on that list as well. But that would be Brandon Marshall, the linebacker. What he did during the time of protest to take a stand, just a man of conviction, always honest, always available. As a journalist, you appreciate players who are available and candid. And it's different than like how a guy plays. It's like, is he at his locker after games? Is he in the locker room during the week? Is he there during tough times? Is he there during good times? And the guys that I've had the best relationships with understand that when you're good, I write you're good. When you're bad, I write you're bad. It's not my job to articulate and make excuses for people. That's not it. That's your franchise's job or the organization's job. And so the ones I've had the best relationships with understand that. Like I always tell them, think about how you root about your favorite team, and if they lost 52-10, and you opened up the paper, it would be online now. And it's like, oh, but they tried really hard. If they'd only converted 17 of those third downs, you'd be like, this guy's got no credibility. Like you want criticism now, fair. And like Preston Wilson would be another guy. Todd Helton, like let's say baseball is weird, Phil, because then you have a locker room of 25 guys. I would say like every year, like 20 to 22 are good guys. That's why it's so hard to get a list. Football, it's not that they're not good guys. There's 53, and it's certainly not the percentage of baseball. And it's a gladiator mentality. They're mercenaries. It's totally different. I get it. But we don't get to know them in football. A lot of it's hit and run journalism. You're running up, getting your two questions in, going to the next locker. And so it's harder to develop a rapport with someone. I'm not looking to be friends. It's just a relationship. So we tell stories and they educate me. That's why like the no-fly zone was so great to me. I would walk up and ask Chris or TJ or Darian or what is this coverage? What happened here? Can you explain this to me? Why did this go on? So I understood it better as a writer because I want to tell people what they don't know, take them where they can't go. But I don't have the answers. I grew up, I played football, but I didn't play in high school. I was a baseball, basketball player. So when it comes to football, I lean on the guys who are in it. So it's different. But my top players, again, Dante will always be someone near that. Dante and Tulo and Matty Holiday and Spielborgs and the Justin Simmonses and Howard Griffiths and Mark Schlereth. I've been blessed to be around a lot of good dudes. And I've very, very, very few negative interactions with professional athletes. And I just feel like the best compliment I've ever had from an athlete is to say, hey, I didn't like everything you wrote. I did like some of it, but you were fair. That's the compliment, is that, hey, you're fair to me.
Yeah, that's all you're looking for. And it'll be cool to see the no-fly zone come back this week for this game. So yeah, cool to
We'll
mention
hear him
those guys.
before we see him, Phil. We'll hear him before we see him.
Very true. Very true. Yes. Do you have a most memorable interview, like a moment that sticks out with a player or coach?
I would say interviewing Tony Gwynn as a college journalist in Yuma, Arizona, because I had just stopped playing high school baseball and summer baseball. Tony Gwynn is someone that I grew up admiring, and I sat with him on a backfield in Yuma, Arizona, and interviewed him for like an hour with an
Wow.
old cassette recorder. That is always memorable to me. Like, it told me, and I didn't realize how great he was. As I thought, my old professional athletes like that, they're not, and nor should they be. But I was like, I knew I wanted to do this, but after interviewing him, I'm like, I 100% want to do this. Like, this is the life I want, because the interview was enlightening, it was educational, it was everything I'd hoped for. So that one sticks out. I mean, it's just having covered 140 baseball games a year, like, it's hard to come up with the one interviews. There were times when you get some time with Peyton Manning off to the side that are memorable because of the way he saw football, and saw the world was different. But it's funny, because those interviews become part of your daily fabric of players. One of my favorite interviews I ever did was that Super Bowl. So it was 33, right? The one in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Was interviewing the members of the rock band Kiss, Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, because I grew up listening to Kiss as a kid, so I remember that more than I would an interview with a player, because it's literally probably in the thousands of the interviews now. So I would say the Tony Gwynn one, because it really reminded me, like, this is what I want to do. And one that just sticks out as we talk here right now is interviewing the members of Kiss, specifically Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley. And I got into a wrestling match with Bam Bam Bigelow in the Yuma airport, where he put me in a choke block when I said that Lawrence Taylor was going to kill him at WrestleMania. Those are my memories of
Those would stick out, I'm sure, Troy. Okay, and then the last one here for you. What's an event that you want to cover but you haven't had the chance to just yet?
There's two. Kentucky Derby would be one. It's just because it's just like, you say a bucket list thing. Kentucky Derby, and I would really like to do Wimbledon. I want to go back to London. My wife and I had a great time in London. It was literally the only highlight of that clown show season with Hackett was that trip to London. I loved everything about London. The people were great. Everything was great about it. And I don't know if it was just because we needed something different to get us away from that seat, but I just loved London. I want to go back if they play in Madrid or they play in Australia. I want to, but the one I would like to cover a Kentucky Derby. So it's some of the normal checklist stuff: Kentucky Derby, a Masters, and Wimbledon. Like those, because those are things I grew up in my childhood as these hallmark type events. I've covered. I mean, how many Super Bowls? 6 or 7. Covered probably 12 World Series. I mean, I've been blessed to cover a lot of huge events, NCAA tournament basketball games. So for me, I would say it's just kind of those off the beaten path: Wimbledon, Kentucky Derby, the Masters.
Oh, those are huge bucket list items, I think, for any sports fan. So a good list there for sure, Troy. Okay, and then the very last question here for you is, what's some career advice? What's something that you would tell a young journalist who's just starting out today?
Listen, I get these emails a lot, Phil, and I think you know me. I'm a positive person, but when kids email me, it's like, oh, I love what you do. I want to cover the Broncos. How do I do it? And most of them don't understand the simple thing. You have to love the craft more than you love being a fan. Mm-hmm. Working in the media is every weekend. It's holidays. It's when your friends are out partying and they're at the lake, you're covering a high school game. When your friends are out at July 4th traveling into Vegas, having all-nighters, you're covering a Rockies Brewers game or a softball game. Like, do you love the craft more than you love being a fan? Because if you don't, you won't last. The money's not great. The hours are insane. It sacrifices relationships. But if you love it and it's what you want to do, you can make a decent living doing this. And you wake up and it's every day's Christmas. You're covering sports for a living. But it's such a hill to make sure you get to the point where man, I get to cover sports and I can't think of anything else that'd be cooler. And if that's your drive, you'll be fine. And I recommend kids do it. If when kids talk to me and they have no energy, no enthusiasm, and they always talk about, I can't wait to go to the game. I can't wait to go to the game. I'm just like, this person's got no shot. Because what always, and I don't mean to laugh at it, because my own sons, they're 24 and 26. They've dealt with employment issues and rejection letters and all this. When they say, oh, the kid, I love sports. We all do.
Yeah.
I would hope you love sports if you want to work in it. But like, for instance, my son Dagan, who works for the San Francisco Giants, he's applying for 3 years ago entry-level positions that are essentially minimum wage, and they're getting 600 to 700 applicants. Like, you have to understand, if this is what you want to do, I'll help you, support you, send me a clip, but you have to sell out for the dream. It's not entirely different than like minor league baseball, where you got to commit to it and give it 2 or 3 years and say, this is my life. This is what I'm going to do. Because if you have any distraction or if you have any doubt, it's hard to make it in this business and make a living doing it. And so my advice is really simple. Work your ass off and find whatever. It's either in front of the camera, behind the camera, writing, radio, podcast. Experiment with that. Find out what you're good at, and then work. Don't play the victim. Don't make excuses. Just work. And typically something good will happen for you. If you decide that everything's against you, you don't like working weekends, your girlfriend's pissed because you're working on Saturday, your parents are mad because you're missing Christmas, this is not the career path for you. It's not. But if you love sports and you love the craft more than sports, go for it.
We've been there, Troy, working on holidays and away from missing out things. So, yeah, for sure. That's a great advice. Troy, thank you so much for your insight on the team. Really loved catching up with you today, and really looking forward to more funny leads in the Denver Post coming up the rest of the season.
You're the best, Phil. Great to see you, my friend.
My thanks to Troy Renck for spending some time here on Broncos and Bourbon. Always enjoy talking to Troy. He just has some of the best one-liners in the business here, and I think it makes a lot of sense that Woody Page and Rick Riley were some influences on him, because you can definitely see that in his writing. Just so funny, and really enjoy reading Troy Renck. And, you know, Troy and I spent a lot of time together last year. We were hosting a show for the Broncos, and got to really know each other a little bit better, but really, has been rubbing elbows with him for the last decade here with the Broncos. So I really appreciate Troy taking some time to offer his insight on the Broncos. And I couldn't agree anymore. I mean, there's some people out there who think that, hey, this season was only about developing Bo Nix. I disagree. I think that it's important to continue to win and change the culture with the Broncos. You could see that every week, that they're playing so much harder, so much more physical, that it matters to these guys, and winning is the ultimate motivation. And so the more that you win, the more that you taste that success, the more that you want it. And I think that the final 7 games here is going to be really interesting, because there are a lot of people out there who say that this Broncos team is pretty good, but they haven't really beaten anybody this year. And I think that there's some truth to that. And I think it was important that they battled the Chiefs the way that they did, and really should have won that game. That told me something about this team. But, getting close doesn't really count. So this is a tipping point game for the Broncos facing the Atlanta Falcons. It's interesting. Either Kirk Cousins is out there throwing for like 4 or 5 touchdown passes, and they're like really explosive, or it feels like they just don't have it some days. And this Broncos defense is going to have its hands full. Bijan Robinson, a tremendous running back there. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out, and just to see how the Broncos bounce back. They got blown out by the Ravens, bounced back in a big way against the Chiefs, but the heartbreaking loss there. Okay, now how do you bounce back this week, playing back at home too, for a game that really it'll tell you a lot about the Broncos here. So I think they get it done this week. I really do. I think Justin Simmons comes back. There's a little bit of emotion surrounding that for him, and I think that the Broncos find a way to get this one in the win column. Audric Estime was awesome in the backfield. I liked using Marvin Mims in the backfield in that Deebo Samuel role a little bit. I think that getting the ball in his hands and allowing him to just figure out whatever's going on with him is important because he's got that burst, that speed. And so I could see the Broncos pulling this one out, and I think that they do it at home against a pretty good Atlanta team. But like Troy said, if the Broncos want to make the playoffs, this is one that they're going to need to get. Okay, let's get into our nightcap this week, and that is the famed Buffalo Trace here. And one of the reasons why this is so popular is because it can be found for under $30. I think I got this one for $24, but because of that, it's becoming harder and harder to find. And so it's really a well-constructed bourbon. If you read anything about this online, people really just say, hey, it's not overly complex, but it's just really put together well. And for this price point, it's hard to beat. It's 90 proof, and it's made by Buffalo Trace Distillery, which produces some other very popular bourbons out there. So let's get into this one here. If you just look at the bottle, it looks, like sort of a light caramel, sort of a honey color. I was looking online for a mash bill, and I didn't actually find one. So if anybody has any information on the mash bill of this, I would be very interested. So let's go ahead and pour this here. Okay, nice little pour in my Broncos Rocks glass here. Give it a nose. So it's a little light, but you could also smell the 90 proof in there. You can smell some of the alcohol coming through. You can smell like a little bit of orange, little bit of like the caramel, vanilla, that kind of a smell, I would say. Nothing too like, it doesn't like hit you, but you can definitely smell a little bit of that alcohol in there. Let's give it a taste. It's nice. At the first, you hit some of the sweeter notes, some of the brown sugar, some honey. A little bit of the spice comes through. Some of the fruit comes through. And then I think the finish is a little bit fruity as well. Kind of like a little bit of a roller coaster there, which is very nice. Yeah, it's like fruity off the bat. A little bit of that orange you can taste. Then some of that sugar and honey. A little bit of spice, and then a little bit of a fruity finish. A light finish, and the spice sticks around a little bit though. So that's very nice. It's not overly complex, but it's just put together very well. And I think the thing about a Buffalo Trace is that it's a crowd pleaser. So like if you're going to have some people over, maybe you're doing a Friendsgiving, something like that coming up, I think Buffalo Trace is definitely something you might want to have around. There's no age statement on Buffalo Trace, but there are some reports that is 8 to 10 years. So that's pretty good, I think, if that's true. And I definitely think, Buffalo Trace is so popular. If you can find it in your area, I definitely think it's worth having on your bar cart. And, everybody, it goes without saying, it's a crowd pleaser, and it's everybody enjoys it. Certainly at this price point, really hard to beat a nice Buffalo Trace there. So I recommend that one. So go out and if you can find a bottle, give it a try, especially if you're just getting into bourbon. Please give this thing a try. So that's going to do it for us this week. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe. We're growing this Broncos and Bourbon channel. We're getting some subscribers going now and really enjoy getting the comments going. So it's been a lot of fun engaging with everybody and building this. So if you do like it, please like and subscribe, and that'll go a long way. And, it goes without mentioning also that nobody's paying me to review these bourbons. I'm just choosing them on my own. And if you do decide to try them, please drink responsibly. All right, that's going to do it for us. My thanks again to Denver Post sports columnist Troy Renck for joining the program. Really enjoyed our conversation this week. All right, time to say goodbye. For Broncos and Bourbon, I am Phil Milani.